To what extent did Oppenheimer excel at demonstrating the culpability and emotional devastation that the use of an atomic bomb entails? And what ethical dilemmas arise in creating one in the first place? When Oppenheimer is first getting involved in the Manhattan Project, the repercussions are, of course, on everybody's mind, but the pursuit of inventing something so impactful and unseen takes precedence over those concerns. Everybody's reasoning for helping is patriotic and somewhat noble. In order to stop the Germans and other foreign threats from winning the war, the US has to be the first superpower to have a nuclear weapon. That way, they can control when it is used and if its use is justified. That's assuming they'll always agree and even know what's best for the world. With all the bureaucratic politics and intricacies of the military-industrial complex, it's very likely that the outcome of the US having a nuclear weapon could end up just as bad or even worse. But if they create the technology first, fewer domestic casualties would happen, and it's only natural for each country to prioritize its own interests. However, a world where Nazis won World War II likely wouldn't be one we'd want to be a part of. The scientists of the Manhattan Project are in somewhat of a lose-lose situation then. What's worse, being a part of the system that creates the most destructive weapon the world has ever seen, or being at the mercy of a foreign country that is doing the same thing? How responsible are they for the ultimate usage of the bomb when they don't have any input on its use? If they assist in creating it, they can help ensure the safety of those testing and researching it, and they can make sure that it operates successfully and as expected so that the outcome is as predictable as possible. Also, can you blame them for wanting to be a part of history? The pursuit of knowledge is exciting, and marveling at what you and your peers can accomplish must have been a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So, it's objectively true that they had a first-hand impact on the creation of such a destructive weapon. But if it wasn't them, someone worse would have created it. So I don't think they should be condemned too harshly for their actions. They aren't responsible for the situation the world is in. It seems with the advancement of artificial general intelligence and deepfake software, humanity is in a similar dilemma right now.
Look, the arrival of strong artificial intelligence has been inevitable for decades. The variable was when, not if, so I don't see Ava as a decision, just an evolution.
Other countries are going to make innovations with that technology, and if we don't keep up with them, we are going to be put at a disadvantage and left behind. As a species, we have a strong sense of curiosity and exploration of what we can accomplish, and we will always progress towards scientific discoveries and making tedious tasks more efficient. However, there are many downsides to consider, like job displacement, privacy concerns, and existential worries. So this is a similar situation to creating nuclear weapons, because regardless of if creating artificial intelligence is what's best for humanity, forging ahead with this development will seemingly open a Pandora's box that may prove impossible to shut once unleashed. So why is humanity still so determined to create something that could potentially be so destructive?
I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
There you go again, Mr. Quotable.
There you go again. It's not my quote. It's what Oppenheimer said after he made the atomic bomb.
Yeah, I know what it is, dude.
What culpability do the high-ranking government officials have who actually decided when and where to drop the atomic bomb? I think the film does a good job at showing the disconnect that can happen when talking about human lives and numbers that our brains can't fully comprehend.
We have a list of 12 cities to choose from. Sorry, 11. I've taken Kyoto off the list due to its cultural significance to the Japanese people. Also, my wife and I honeymooned there. It's a magnificent city.
As outsiders, I think it's easy for us to chastise the lackadaisical attitude on display here, but I think it's partly them just trying to be as logical as possible in the compartmentalization of the magnitude of what they're discussing. How would you rather they behave? I think the other extreme of them panicking with anxiety and letting the abundance of fear overcome them wouldn't be ideal either. So it may come across as off-putting for them to not be in an emotional state between those two extremes, but I find it somewhat understandable. I think they should be as level-headed as possible because of how important the impact of what they're discussing will be. It may sound counterintuitive, but there's an argument that an overabundance of empathy could actually hinder their judgment of choosing the best outcome. There's a psychologist at Yale University named Paul Bloom who wrote a book called Against Empathy: The Case for Rational Compassion.
But the problem with empathy, and one of the problems of empathy, there are many, but the main problem is it serves as a spotlight. It zooms me in on a person in the here and now. And as a result, it's biased, it's parochial, it's short-sighted, and it's innumerate. One way I put it is, it's because of empathy that governments and societies care so much more about a little girl stuck in a well than about millions or more people suffering and dying through climate change.
You wouldn't want them dwelling on the immediate deaths if there truly would be much more suffering later on that we can't yet mourn for, because we just have to imagine their pain in the abstract. Another example of the short-term bias we have that Paul Bloom has mentioned has to do with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. The average cost of granting a Make-A-Wish request is about $10,000. However heartwarming it is to see a sick or dying child have a really fun vacation with their family or help out with their hospital bills, that money could be spent more effectively. If instead it were spent on medicine to prevent children from getting malaria, it would save 2 children's lives. So what's really more ethical? Actually saving lives, or giving someone a fun time without really helping them all that much? It pulls on our heartstrings more, seeing a child battling with cancer and getting to be Batman for a day, rather than just sending that money overseas to help people we won't ever see. Making Bat-Kid cost over $100,000. However, without that emotional tug, would people have even donated in the first place? Yes, the money could be better spent elsewhere, but human bias can make you spend money on more short-sighted interests. In Oppenheimer, the government officials are ultimately trying to limit the amount of overall casualties that can happen if the war is prolonged. There was speculation that the war would end soon anyways, so using a nuclear weapon would be unnecessary overkill. Without the hindsight we have now, it's difficult to know just how hopeless and fearful the future looked from their perspective. However, they did objectively know that even conservatively, tens of thousands of innocent lives would die, and many more would be impacted by the radiation and economical impacts of the bombing. So I'm not trying to say that every choice they made was absolutely justified, but just showing that there are many factors to consider. Something that seemed very fast-paced in the film was the decision and act of the US dropping 2 bombs on Japan, not just one. Supposedly, this was a display of power to indicate to the Japanese that the United States had an endless supply of bombs and could continually drop them until they finally surrendered. So what are some alternatives they could have done instead? They could have had a deterrence display by demonstrating the bomb's power in an unpopulated area so the enemy could see what destruction they could cause if they didn't back down. In doing research for this essay, I learned that the US actually did have resources for more bombs, so although it would have likely been expensive, they could have at least tried that first. They also could have held on to the bombs as a final resort and tried to win the war with the strategic use of the weapons already in play. But again, if they wait too long, their enemies will create nuclear weapons of their own, and then you risk worldwide nuclear war instead of only 2 isolated uses.
According to my intelligence, which I cannot share with you, the Japanese people will not surrender under any circumstances, short of a successful and total invasion of the home islands. Many lives will be lost, American and Japanese. The use of the atomic bomb on Japanese cities will save lives.
So it's very difficult to ascertain whether the outcome was actually worth it. This film does a good job at presenting these concerns, but I don't feel it ultimately says what should have been done either. Because of our look into Oppenheimer's psyche, it seems to lean to the side of not dropping the bombs, but I don't think it goes far enough in showing the horrific aftermath that would be needed to further convey that message. My favorite scene in the entire film is when Oppenheimer is giving his victory speech in the gym, and you see the manifestation of the internal dread and guilt he has because of what he's created. It's a haunting scene, but I think the film should have dwelled in that uncomfortable space even longer. But not only did it not do that, but it didn't show the bombing itself or even any of the victims. Oppenheimer can't bring himself to look at the casualties caused by his creation, and the film can't show us either. Maybe that's just us seeing it through his eyes, so the goal is to cause us to connect with his character's point of view and his personal experience better. But I think the film needs to show the consequences. I could imagine the criticisms with showing hauntingly horrific pictures or footage from the victims of the bombings as coming across as exploitative or tasteless. If you would be offended by that, why aren't you offended by Nolan making a movie about Oppenheimer's life in the first place? It's showing hardships he went through and the mental torment he endured, and it's all given to us in the medium of a giant blockbuster movie. So how is one really more exploitative than the other? Does realism now make it offensive to show? I often see the term exploitation thrown around a lot whenever a movie depicts a real person in a negative light, or when a TV show depicts real victims of serial killers. I just don't see those things to be exploitative in the negative sense that many others think. I don't think it's wrong to show depictions of real murder victims and have their stories told in a dramatic way. The way they died was gruesome and would be tough to witness, so delving into the subject should be as well. And it's not like the material is conveying a message that condones this appalling behavior. So I think it's actually respectful to show how shocking the events that happened to them really were. And if you personally don't have the emotional capacity or desire to view them, you don't have to. But I think true-to-life, uncomfortable, and shocking films are important. If we cover up and erase the past so that it's less offensive and traumatic, it takes away from the struggle people went through, and we won't be able to learn from them and move forward as a society. So I think in Oppenheimer, to even start to grasp how destructive the atomic blast truly was, showing victims of the aftermath wouldn't be in poor taste. It would make us empathize and sympathize with the victims more. Observing what Oppenheimer couldn't stand to watch would serve to intensify the magnitude of the consequences that his invention has. And that's what I want. I want to feel something and be moved by what I'm seeing. You could also argue that it's actually insulting to the victims to step up to the ledge of their sorrow and then not have the guts to jump into the horror they faced, because the film is still using them as a plot device to show the torment Oppenheimer is going through. But I also understand that it's just not the focal point of the film, so they wouldn't have time to fully explore the trauma of those impacted, with the already lengthy runtime and the focus being on Oppenheimer himself. I see that point, but I still think they should have showed something more. At the same time, there's also an argument that even trying to reenact the extreme suffering some people have gone through is futile and offensive, because actors and movie sets will never be able to fully capture their torment. I think this applies more to war movies, and I agree that a film won't be able to fully capture that traumatic setting, but I think the pursuit is admirable. I think most people would agree that having films like Come and See, Schindler's List, or Saving Private Ryan are of benefit to society, even though they are limited in how true to life they can depict war. But their pursuit can honor the memories of those who persevered through those hardships, and they can shed a light to the public on how despicable humanity can be, therefore showing how we have to learn from our mistakes and do better. I think people pick and choose what they see as exploitative, but there are ways to depict true-to-life oppressions in an ethical way. I understand that viewing or even acknowledging the gruesome details of atrocities through history can be difficult for people, so I think that there's a time and place to show them. And I think, at least for me, this should have been one of them. But maybe I just wanted a different film than what Nolan wanted to make. The ability for humanity to even be able to create something like an atomic bomb is a pretty spectacular feat. It's like we unlocked a secret that was supposed to be kept hidden, like we got too smart for our own good, but not emotionally intelligent enough to not still be at war with each other. Could you imagine what humanity could accomplish if we were working as a group towards common goals? Something similar to the future the aliens in the movie Arrival were trying to put into motion. Us communicating with each other and combining our intellect to create unseen wonders. Ultimately, this is a future we are unlikely to see, so maybe dwelling on the cynical tendencies of humanity even further in this film would just depress people. But I think we still have to contemplate these uncomfortable realities. So, with Oppenheimer, despite its flaws, it at least serves as an excellent jumping off point to begin reflecting on the sins of humanity. If you want to support this channel even further, consider joining my Patreon. You can participate in monthly Q&As and get insight to what I'm working on next. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you again soon.